I'm gonna go.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats. Welcome to London, 1894, when there were no cell phones and there was no disruption with the incessant playing of We Don't Talk About Bruno. Please turn yours off. And remember, crying babies are like good intentions and should be carried out. This show was written with 2 intermissions, which is ridiculous. We can stay focused for at least... Oh, wait, you're Americans, aren't you? Balderdash. Fine. 1 intermission near the end, 10 minutes tops, and the show still must end before 9:30. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy as Ammon Arts Community Theatre proudly presents Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest.
Did you hear what I was singing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that. For your sake, I don't sing accurately. Anyone can sing accurately. But I sing with wonderful expression. As far as the throat is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh. By the way, Lane, I read from your book that on Thursday night, when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing came to dine with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
8 bottles and a pint, sir.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne?
Right.
I ask merely for information.
Attribute it to the fine quality of the wine, sir. I've often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Oh, is marriage so demoralizing as that?
Oh, I do believe it to be a pleasant state, sir. I have very little experience of it myself up to present. I've only been married once, and that as a consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir, it's not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
Oh, my dear Ernest, what brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algie.
I believe it is customary in good society to have some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Neighbors.
Got nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire?
Oh, no, perfectly horrid. I never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Yes, Shropshire, of course. Hello, Algie, why all the cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta. And Gwendolyn.
Oh, how perfectly delightful.
Yes, but I'm afraid that Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
Well, may I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolyn. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
You call that pleasure? I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
No, it is romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted, one usually is, I believe. Then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt of that, Algie. The divorce court was invented especially for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There is no use speculating in the subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Please, don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
But you have been eating them all the time.
That is quite a different matter. She is my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
Oh, and very good bread and butter it is, too.
My dear fellow, you need not eat as if you were going to eat at all. You behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth would you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
No, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It explains the extraordinary number of bachelors that one sees all over the place. And in the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolyn is my first cousin. And before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algie, by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily.
Bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say that you have had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness that you had let me know. I had been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
Well, there's no good offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
Well, now that I look at the thing, I find that it isn't yours after all.
Oh, well, of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times. And you've no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture is dependent upon what one shouldn't read.
Yes, I am quite aware of the fact. And I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing that one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily. And you said you don't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. For goodness sake, give it back to me, Algie.
Yes, but why does she call herself Little Cecily if she's your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My good fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall. Some aunts are not tall. Surely that is a matter that an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. Ugh. Well, that is absurd. For goodness sake, give it back to me, Algie.
Yes, but why does she call herself Little Cecily if she's your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? And as a matter of fact, why does she call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to a dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle? I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it is Ernest.
Yes, well, it isn't Ernest. It is Jack.
You've always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. You're the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. It's perfectly absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. Here's one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing before the Albany. I'll keep this as proof that your name is Ernest, if ever you attempt to deny it to me or to Gwendolyn or to anyone else.
Well, it is Ernest in town, and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle? Come on, old boy. You'd much better have the thing out at once.
Better have the thing out. You talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now go on. Tell me, why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
Well, produce my cigarette case first. Thank you.
Now produce your explanation, and pray, make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing at all improbable about my explanation. In fact, it is perfectly ordinary. The old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy under rather peculiar circumstances, left me all the money I possess, and in his will made me guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle from motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
Well, if you No. That is nothing to you, my good fellow. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly that the thing is not in Shropshire.
I know it is not in Shropshire. I have Bunburyed all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algy, I don't know whether you will be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one must adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much at all to either one's own health or happiness, in order to get up to town as often as I like, I have always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Ernest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
Oh, well, that wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You had better leave that to people who haven't been to university. They do it so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you are a Bunburyist. You're one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
You've invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest, in order that you may be able to go up to town as often as you like. I have invented a very valuable permanent invalid called Bunbury, in order that I may be able to go down into the country as often as I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. In fact, if it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight, for I've really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
Ah, well, I haven't invited you to dine anywhere with me tonight.
I know. You're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It's very foolish of you. Nobody hates more than not receiving invitations.
Well, at any rate, I can't dine at the Savoy. I owe them about £700. And they're always bringing judgments against me. It bothers me terribly.
Well, why don't you pay them?
Well, because Ernest is one of those chaps who never pays a bill.
Well then, we'll dine at Willis's.
Ah, that's a good idea. No, you had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta tonight.
I have no intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dined there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I'm always treated as a member of the family, and either sat down with no woman at all or two. And in the third place, I know exactly whom she will place me next to tonight. She will place me next to...
Mary Farquhar.
Mary Farquhar! Who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table.
Oh, she's the worst.
That is not very nice. Indeed, it is not even decent. And the amount of women in London who do that is terribly horrible. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
But I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I am going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested, and it is rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Ernest. And I strongly advise you to do the same with your with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
I have no intention of doing anything of the kind. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. And if ever I get married, I will certainly try to forget that fact.
You know, if I marry a charming girl like Gwendolyn, and she is the only girl I ever met in my life that I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it. In married life, 3 is company, and 2 is none.
That, my dear young friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and the happy English home has proved in half the time.
Don't try to be cynical. It is perfectly easy to be cynical.
Oh, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. Oh, that must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I can get Aunt Augusta aside for about 15 minutes so that you may have the opportunity of proposing to Gwendolyn, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
My dear boy, please be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you're behaving very well.
I am feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
Well, you are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I'm not that. It would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we are a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. Oh, and now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolyn?
Thanks, Mamma, but I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens! Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches?
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I checked twice.
No cucumbers?
Not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I am very distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It makes no matter, Algernon. I had crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
Oh, it certainly has changed its colour, from what cause I, of course, cannot say. Oh, thank you. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She is such a lovely woman, so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
Aunt Augusta, I'm afraid that I cannot dine with you tonight after all.
Oh, I should hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
Yes, my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. The doctor thinks that I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, Algernon, I must say that I think it is high time that this Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has practically said whatever it is they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I will speak with Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious. But I am sure he will be all right by Saturday. But the music is a great difficulty, you see. If one plays bad music, people don't listen. If one plays good music, people don't talk. But I will run over the program I've drawn out if you will kindly come with me into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think they are vulgar and look shocked, which is very vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. Oh, but German seems to me a respectable language. Indeed, I believe it is so. Oh, thank you, dear. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming weather we're having, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
Oh, well, I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
Oh. And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I have often had to speak to her about.
Yes. Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl that I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I am quite well aware of the fact, and I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines and has reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Ernest. Thank you, dear. There's something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Ernest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Oh, darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
Oh, my own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest.
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it is. But supposing it were something else, do you really mean to say that you couldn't love me then?
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Well, personally, darling, I don't much care about the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
Oh, it suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
I see. Well, to speak candidly, darling, I must say that I think that there are lots of other, much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, to be a charming name.
Jack?
Yes?
No. There is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all were, without exception, more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John. And I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Ernest.
Ernest, yes. Well, Gwendolyn, I must be rebaptized at once. What I mean is that we must be married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely you know that I love you. And you have led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you are not absolutely indifferent to me.
Oh, I adore you. But you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject hasn't even been touched on.
Well, then, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly, beforehand, that I am absolutely determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn,
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
Oh, well, you know what I've got to say to you, right?
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you... Yes. Gwendolyn, will you... Yes. Oh. Okay. Oh, yes. Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you have been about it. I am afraid you have very little experience in how to propose.
Well, my own one, I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderful eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite perfect. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come upon a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she could be allowed to arrange for herself. And now, I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
In the carriage, Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn! The carriage!
Yes, Mama.
You may take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you, Mr. Worthing, that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. However, I am quite ready to enter your name should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit that I smoke.
I am glad to hear it. A gentleman should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at.
Thank you.
I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to be married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
Which do I know? I know nothing, Lady Bracknell, nothing.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted of one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
I do own a country house with, of course, some land attached to it. About 1,500 acres, I believe. Of course, I don't rely on that for any of my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only ones who make anything out of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms does it have? No, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You do have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature such as Gwendolyn's can hardly be regarded to reside in the country.
I do have a house at Belgrave Square.
Oh, what number at Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Well, both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Oh, I'm afraid I really have none. I mean, I'm a liberal unionist.
They count as Tories. They dine with us or come in the evenings at any rate. Now to minor matters. Are your parents living?
Well, I have lost both my parents, Lady Bracknell.
Ooh, to lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness.
Well,
Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth.
Well, I'm afraid that I really don't know. You see, when I said that I had lost both my parents, it would be near the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. You see, I was found.
Found?
Yes. The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very kind and charitable disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket to Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
Where did this charitable gentleman with a first-class ticket to that seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Oh, yes, Lady Bracknell. I was in a handbag, a rather large black leather handbag with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
Cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial, Mr. Worthing. I confess, I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate, bred in a handbag, whether it has handles or not, seems to me to display contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life. That reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution, and I suppose you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion. Indeed, it has probably been used for that purposes before. Oh, but it could hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a good position in family life. Oh.
Well, then, may I ask you, then, what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say that I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
Well, I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and find some relations as soon as possible, and to produce one parent of either sex before the marrying season is quite over.
Lady Bracknell, I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. Oh boy. Well, I could produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home, and I really think that ought to satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it got to do with me? You would hardly ever dream that Lord Bracknell and I would allow our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good day, Mr. Worthing.
Good day. Oh. Don't sing that ghastly tune, Algie. How idiotic you are. Oh.
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? I know 'tis a way she has. She's always refusing people. I told her it's most ill-natured of her.
Gwendolyn is as right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. I never met such a gorgon in my life. I don't even know what a gorgon is, but I am quite certain that Lady Bracknell is one. At any rate, she is a monster without being a myth. Which is rather unfair of me, Algie. I beg your pardon. I suppose I shouldn't talk of your own aunt in that way before you.
Oh, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct about when to die.
That is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue about it with you. You always want to argue about things.
Well, that's what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. Oh, Algie, you don't suppose that there is much chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years or so, do you?
Women always become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his.
Is that supposed to be clever?
It is as profound as any observation in civilized life should be.
I, for one, am sick to death of cleverness. Everyone is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The whole thing has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness that we had a few fools left.
We have.
Well, I I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course.
What fools?
So, have you told Gwendolyn yet about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear young fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing that one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl like Gwendolyn. What extraordinary ideas you have about how to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her, if she is pretty. And to some others, if she's plain.
That is nonsense. Oh, my goodness.
It isn't. What about your brother? What about the profligate Ernest?
Oh, Ernest. By the end of the week, I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died suddenly in Paris of, I don't know, apoplexy. Lots of people die quite suddenly of apoplexy, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's the sort of thing that runs in families.
Oh.
You'd much better say a severe chill.
Yes, and you are quite sure that a severe chill isn't hereditary?
Of course it isn't.
Very well. My poor brother Ernest is carried off suddenly in Paris of a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But won't Miss Cardew be a little too much distressed about the death of your poor brother Ernest?
Oh, that is all right. Cecily isn't a silly, romantic sort of girl, I'm very glad to say. She does have a capital appetite, goes on long walks and pays no attention at all to her lessons. Oh, that girl.
I'd rather like to see this, Cecily.
Oh, yes, No. I shall take very good care that you never do. She is excessively pretty. And only just 18, Algie.
Have you told Gwendolyn yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who's only just 18?
Well, one doesn't just blurt these things out to people. Besides, Cecily and Gwendolyn are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I'll bet you anything you like. Half an hour after they have met, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only do that when they have called each other a lot of other things first. But, well, we really must go and dress. Do you know it is nearly 7?
It is always nearly 7.
Well, what would you like to do after dinner? Go to the theater?
Oh, no, I loathe listening.
Well, we could go to the club.
Oh, I hate talking.
We could trot around the Empire at 10.
Oh, I can't bear looking at things. It is so silly.
Well, then, what shall we do?
Nothing.
It is awfully hard work doing nothing. But I don't mind hard work, especially if there's no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Good heavens, Gwendolyn!
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algie, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You're not quite old enough to do that.
My own darling.
Ernest, we can never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pays any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I ever had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often,
What?
nothing that she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Oh, my own darling.
The story of your romantic origin is related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country.
My address. Yes. The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire. Yes, very nice.
There's a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
Oh, my darling.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algie, you may turn round now.
Thanks, I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
Oh, well, you will allow me to escort you out, Miss Fairfax.
Certainly.
Oh, I will see Miss Fairfax out, Lane.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going Bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You can hang up all the Bunbury suits, my smoking jackets and all that.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Oh, Lane, you are a perfect pessimist.
I do try to give satisfaction, sir.
You. That will do, Lane, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Now there is a charming, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever saw in my life that I cared about. Oh, goodness. What are you so amused about?
Oh, I'm just worried about my poor friend Bunbury, that is all.
Well, if you do not take care, your friend Mr. Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
Oh, I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
Oh, that is nonsense. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Cecily! Cecily! Your German grammar is on the table. Intellectual pleasure awaits you. Pray, turn to page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. Indeed, he laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. In fact, he always lays stress on your German when he's leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he's so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health. Indeed, I know of no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I'm surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Frivolity and idle merriment would have no place in his conversation. You know how concerned he is about that poor young man, his brother, Ernest.
Ernest. I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would. You know, German and geology and things of that kind influence a man very much.
Ah, well, I don't think that even I could have any effect on a character who, according to his own brother, is so irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I'm not sure I would want to reform him. I'm not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. Huh. As a man sows, so should he reap. Cecily, please, put your diary away. I don't understand why you should have a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels.
Cecily, please do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel. I myself wrote one in earlier times.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are! I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
Well, the good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so. But it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Oh, alas, no. The manuscript was lost. The speculations are profitless. Cecily, about your work.
Oh, but I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
And how are we this morning, Miss Prism? You are, I trust, well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you through the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not said anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not being inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. Oh, I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned to town yet?
No, we do not expect him until Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes, he usually likes to spend his Sundays in London. He is not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts the unfortunate younger man his brother seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
Oh, a classical allusion merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I will see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think I actually do have a bit of a headache, and a walk might do it some good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might as go as far as the schools and back.
Oh, that would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy while I am away. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. These metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, before the Albany W, Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism was in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak with you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come out here. I suppose you had better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I've never met any really wicked person before. I feel very frightened. I'm so afraid he will look just like everyone else. He does.
Oh. You're my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
Oh, you are under some strange mistake. I'm not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. And you, I see from your card, are my Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest, my wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I am not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I'm wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you'd not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked but being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Oh, well, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
Oh, that is a great disappointment. I am to leave by the first train on Monday. I have an appointment that I'm anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere, but in London?
Oh, the appointment is in London.
Oh, well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of beauty of life, but still, I think you'd better wait till Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
My what?
You're emigrating. He's gone up to buy your outfit.
I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you will require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you'd have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, yes. The reports I have received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
That I'm not. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission, cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Might you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quick talk of you, but I think you should try.
Great. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I'm hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Might I have a flower for my buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a flower.
A Marshall Neal?
No, I would prefer pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
Then they are a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh? I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
Oh, you are too much alone, dear doctor.
Oh.
You should get married. A misanthrope, I understand, a womanthrope, never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
Oh, well, that must be the reason the primitive church has not lost it up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by perpetually remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy can lead weaker vessels astray.
Oh, but is a man not equally attractive when married?
Oh, no married man is attractive to anyone, except to his wife.
And often, I've been told, not even to her.
Well, that depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be counted on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulture. My metaphor was taken from fruits.
Yes.
Where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools. Mr. Worthing!
Oh, Mr. Worthing, this is indeed a surprise. We didn't expect you until Monday afternoon.
Yes, I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Mr. Worthing, I trust that this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
Yes, my brother.
More debts and extravagance?
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead.
Your brother Ernest dead?
Yes, quite dead.
Well, that is a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Oh, death is not a punishment for the wicked, Miss Prism. It is the end of us all. Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing you are always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Oh, poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad in Paris. I received a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
Well, as a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, Miss Prism, charity. None of us is perfect. I myself am particularly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
Interment? No. He seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
Oh, in Paris. I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the end. You would, no doubt, wish for some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday?
Sure.
My sermon on the meaning of man in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful or, as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, baptisms, confirmations, on days of humiliation, and festival days. The last time I delivered it was at the cathedral, as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent among the Upper Orders. The bishop, who was present, was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
Yes. That reminds me, Dr. Chasuble. You mentioned baptisms, I think. Christenings? I suppose you know. Oh, you know how to christen, all right?
I'm afraid that's actually one of the rector's more regular duties in this parish. I've often spoken to the poor classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Yes, he was unmarried.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear doctor. I am very fond of children, of course. No, you see, I wish to be christened myself this afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been baptized already.
Oh, I don't remember anything about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have doubts. But I don't know if the thing would bother you very much in any way, or if you think I'm a bit too old now.
Oh, not at all, not at all. The sprinkling and indeed the immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Yes. Immersion?
Oh, you need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed, I would think advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour do you wish the ceremony to be performed?
Oh, well, I might trot round about 5 if that suits you.
Oh, perfectly, perfectly. I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins that occurred recently.
Oh, well, I don't really see much fun in being christened with other babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Oh, perfectly, admirably, admirably. And now, Mr. Worthing, I shall no longer intrude into a house of sorrow. I would merely ask that you be not too much bowed down by grief. What seems to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
I would think this is a rather obvious blessing.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I'm pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change them.
Cecily!
My child, my child.
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? You look as if you had toothache, and I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother.
Who?
Your brother Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
Well, I haven't got a brother anymore.
Don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I will tell him to come out, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
No,
These are very joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to his sudden loss, this seems to me particularly distressing.
My brother in the dining room. Well, I don't know what it all means, but I think it is perfectly absurd. Yes. Oh, good heavens.
Brother John, I am very sorry for all the trouble I have given you, and I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here disgraceful, and he knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often.
He has been talking about Bunbury, has he? Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. He told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Yes, Bunbury. Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. It is enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
I must admit that the faults were all on my side.
Oh, yes.
But I must say that Brother John's coldness towards me is peculiarly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering it is the first time I've come here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never. Never, never.
Well, this will certainly be the last time I shall ever do it.
It is pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the 2 brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, my child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
Algie! You young scoundrel! You must get out of this place at once. I don't allow any Bunburying here.
I have put Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right.
What?
His luggage, sir. I have unpacked it and placed it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can only stay a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has been suddenly called back to town, I'm afraid.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I've not been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Well, do you hear that? It is your duty as a gentleman that calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
Well, I can certainly understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
Yes, she... No. You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It's perfectly childish to be in deep mourning and carrying an urn for a man who happens to be staying at your house for a whole week.
You are not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or anything else. You have got to leave by the 4:05 train, yes.
Yes, but I should not leave you while you are in mourning. That would be most unkind of me. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I should think it very unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you're not too long. You take so long to dress, and with such little result.
Well, that is better than being always overdressed as you are. Oof.
If I'm occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being always immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, yes, you have got to leave by the 4:05. And I certainly hope you will have a very pleasant trip back to town. This Bunburying of yours has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see her before I go and make arrangements for another Bunbury. Oh, there she is now.
Oh, I mean, I came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
Yes, and it is a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can enjoy with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
It can wait, Merriman. For 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope I shall not offend you. I hope I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you'll allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
You keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it. May I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you'll order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I'm quite ready for more. Oh, don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell cough.
Cecily, ever since I first saw your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think that you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
Tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anybody in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy, of course. Why, we've been engaged for the last 3 months.
Right?
It will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you of course have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And of course a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
But when did we become engaged?
On the 14th of February last, worn out by entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear old tree here. The next day, I bought this little ring in your name, and this is the bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
I bought this for you? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've a wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given for leading such a bad life. Oh! And this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
But, my dear, sweet Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I grew tired of asking the postman every morning, day after day, if there was a letter from me from London. So I finally did the sensible thing to preserve my sanity and wrote the letters for you.
You wrote my letters for me?
3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They'd make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote me after I'd broken off the engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. On the 22nd of last March. You can see the entry if you like. Today I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But what had I done? I'd done nothing at all. I'm very much hurt indeed to hear that you broke it off. Particularly when the weather was so charming.
Well, it would hardly have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
Oh, you're so sweet, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy.
You'll never break off our engagement again, will you, Cecily?
I just think I could break it off now that I have actually met you. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You mustn't laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Ernest. There is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Ernest.
Do you mean to tell me that you could not love me if my name wasn't Ernest?
What name would you have?
Oh, I don't. Algernon, for instance.
Oh, but I don't like the name of Algernon. Oh.
Well, I don't see why you shouldn't like the name of Algernon. Algernon is a very aristocratic name. Half of the chaps in bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, you could not love me if my name was Algie?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character. But I fear I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in all rites and ceremonials of the church?
Oh, yes. Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He's never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once on a most important christening. I mean, most important business.
Oh?
I shan't be away for more than half an hour.
Considering we've been engaged since February the 14th, and that I only met you today for the first time, I feel it is rather hard that you should leave me for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into my diary.
Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray, ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon, and you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax. I suppose one of the many good elderly women associated with Uncle Jack and some of his philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. I think it is so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. Something tells me we're going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much, after having known each other for such a comparatively short time. Pray, sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Yes. Perhaps this might be a favorable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father's Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. And certainly, once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is part of her system. So, do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolyn. I am very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also.
Oh, no, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed. Indeed?
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I'm Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh. It is strange you never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. But I'm not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I am very fond of you, Cecily. I have liked you ever since I met you. But I am bound to state that now that I know that you're Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish that you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Pray do. I think that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception, but even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influence of the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history, supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so indeed, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time.
Ah, that accounts for it. Now that I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Oh, Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian.
Quite sure.
Oh, good.
In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
Dearest Gwendolyn, there's no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. A little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, I think there's been some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
You are under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 5 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. I am so very sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolyn, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish, but I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have got into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I have never used nor seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay the tea as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in London?
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anyone manages to exist in the country, if anyone who is anyone does. The country always bores me to death.
That is what the newspapers call agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering very much from it just at present. It is almost an epidemic amongst them, I have been told. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter. Cake is rarely seen in the best houses nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I'm trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you've many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Ernest, my own Ernest.
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon.
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack? Oh!
Here is Ernest.
My own love.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolyn!
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolyn! I mean to Gwendolyn.
No, of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh. Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh. Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I like. I could deny anything if I like. But my name certainly is John. It has been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet, wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, will you not?
Sister! There's just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing! There is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Yes. Well, Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life I have ever been reduced to such a painful position. And I am afraid I have really no experience in doing anything of the kind. But to speak quite candidly, I have no brother, Ernest. I have no brother at all. I never had a brother in my life, and I certainly have not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
No, not even of any kind.
I'm afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither one of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl suddenly to find herself in, is it?
Oh. Let us go into the house. They would hardly venture to come after us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call Bunburying, I suppose.
Yes, and a most wonderful Bunbury it is. The most wonderful Bunbury I've ever had in my life.
Yes, well, you've no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
One has a right to Bunbury wherever one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburyist? Oh, good heavens. Oh.
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants to have any sort of amusement in life. I happen to be serious about Bunburying. What on earth you are serious about, I haven't the faintest idea. About everything, I should fancy. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
Yes, well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite so often as you used to, Algy. And a very good thing, too.
Your brother is looking a little off color, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was.
And not such a bad thing either.
As for your conduct toward Miss Cardew, I must say that I think that you are taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that to be quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
And I can find no excuse at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
Yes, but I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn, that is all. I love her.
I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
Yes, there is certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there is much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Yes, well, that is no business of yours.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It's very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that, and then merely at dinner parties.
How you can sit there, calmly, eating muffins, when we are in this horrible trouble, I can't make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, one should always eat muffins quite calmly. If I didn't, the butter would probably get on my cuffs. It is the only way to do things.
Yes, well, I think it is perfectly heartless that you're eating muffins at all, under the circumstances.
Eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, if you were to ask any of my deeply cherished friends, when I'm in really great trouble, I am eating muffins because I'm unhappy.
Well, that is no reason why you should eat them all in that greedy way.
But you just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
No, I said it was perfectly heartless of you. Under the circumstances, that is a very different thing.
But the muffins are the same.
Algie, I wish to goodness you would go.
But I haven't even had dinner yet. You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. I never go anywhere without my dinner. Nobody ever does, except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Ernest.
Yes, well, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning to be christened myself at 5:30, and I, naturally, will take the name of Ernest. Gwendolyn would wish it. We can't both be called Ernest. It's absurd. And besides, I have every right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence at all that I have ever been christened by anyone. I should think it extremely probable I never was. And so does Dr. Chasuble. It is entirely different in your case. You have been baptized already.
Yes, but I've not been baptized in years.
Yes, but you have been baptized. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. I think you not knowing you're ever having been baptized, I find it very dangerous you're venturing on it now. It might make you very unwell. You need hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected to you almost died this week of a severe chill.
Yes, but you said that a severe chill isn't hereditary. Ha!
It didn't used to be. Ha! But I dare say it is now. Science, always changing its mind.
That is nonsense. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Would you please eat tea cake instead? I don't like tea cake.
I don't like tea cake.
Well, why do you allow it to be served up for your guests? What ideas you have of hospitality?
Algernon, I have already asked you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you just go?
Because I've not finished my tea yet. And besides, there's still one muffin left.
And now, a 10-minute intermission for you attention-deficient, rebellious Americans.
The fact that they did not follow us at once into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They've been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't got a cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery.
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. 'Tis the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we must not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing! I have something very particular to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolyn, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief! Kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have the opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't, but that doesn't change the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer me for pretending to have a brother? Was it that you might have an opportunity for coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have grave doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. The explanations appear to be quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I'm more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes. I mean, no.
True. I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which one of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly. Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names?
Is that all?
But we're going to be baptized this afternoon.
For my sake, you are prepared to do this terrible thing.
I am.
To please me, you are ready to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
Darling!
Darling!
Lady Bracknell!
Gwendolyn! What does this mean?
Merely that I...
Don't go.
Merely that I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here. Sit down. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young. A physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin. I followed her at once by a luggage train. You will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolyn, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now as regards Algernon. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
May I ask if it is in this house in which your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Bunbury? No, Bunbury does not live here. In fact, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. I mean, Bunbury died this afternoon.
Dead? What did Mr. Bunbury die of?
He was, quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he is well punished for his morbidity. Mr. Worthing, may I ask who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married.
I do not know if there is anything peculiarly exciting in the air of this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements seems to me considerably above the proper average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea there was any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, SW, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporen, Fifeshire, NB.
Oh, that is not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period, Lady Bracknell. They are open to your inspection.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, and Markby.
Oh, Markby, and Markby. A firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I am told that one of the Mr. Markbys has occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. Thus far, I am satisfied.
How extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. You will also be pleased to hear that I have in my possession certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the English and German varieties.
A life crowded with incident, I see, though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I am not myself in favor of premature experiences. Oh, come now, Gwendolyn. The time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. Oh, as a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, may I ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, only about £130,000. And in the funds, that is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell, so pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. 130,000?
Yes.
And in the funds?
You may sit down. Yes.
Oh, Miss Cardew seems a most attractive young lady now that I look at her.
Oh, doesn't she?
Few girls of the present day have any really solid qualities. Any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of superficiality. Come over here, dear. Oh, yes. Kindly turn around for me, sweet child. Oh, no, the side view is what I want. There. Yes, quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The chin a little higher, dear. Yes, style largely depends on the way that the chin is worn. They are worn very high just at present. Algernon.
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
I don't care tuppence about social possibilities.
Oh, never speak disrespectfully of high society, Algernon. Only those who can't get into it do that. Now, you know, dear, Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon, and I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed of allowing that to stand in my way. I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may kiss me, Cecily.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You may also refer to me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon. I am not in favor of long engagements. They give one the opportunity of finding out each other's character before the marriage, which I think is never advisable.
Yes, well, I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but I'm afraid that this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but you see, I do not approve at all of his moral character. You see, I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew, Algernon? Impossible. He is an Oxonian.
Yes, I fear there can be little doubt about the matter. You see, this morning, during my temporary absence in London, on an important question of romance, yes, he gained admission to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I have just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of my Perrier Jouet Brut 89. Wine I had been specially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea, where he devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he was perfectly well aware from the start that I have no brother, that I never had a brother, and that I don't intend to have a brother, not even of any kind. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided entirely to overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
Oh, my goodness, how extremely generous of you, Lady Bracknell, but, oh, well, I'm afraid that my own decision upon the matter remains unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come over here, dear. How old are you?
Well, I'm really only 18, but I always admit to 20 when I go to evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration to your age. Indeed, a woman should never be entirely accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties, well, it should not be long till you're of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So I don't think that your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you yet again, Lady Bracknell. But it is only fair to tell you that according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come legally of age until she is 35.
Oh, that does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton, to my knowledge, has remained 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which was many years ago now. I see no reason why our sweet Cecily will not still be more attractive than she is at the age in which you mention. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively, but I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting, even 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me rather cross. I'm not a punctual person myself, but I do like punctuality in others, and waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
Well, what shall we do, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait till she is 35, a remark which I admit seems to me to display a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider.
But, my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment that you consent to my marriage with Gwendolyn, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
What you propose, Mr. Worthing, you must know is out of the question.
Oh, well then a passionate celibacy is all any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny that I desire for Gwendolyn. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Oh, come, dear, we have missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more would expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christenings! Sir, is that not somewhat premature? Mama!
Both of these gentlemen have expressed their desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? The idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if he learned that this is the way in which you waste your time and your money.
Am I to understand there to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I don't think that as things are now, that it would be of much practical value to either of us.
Oh, I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savor of the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views I have completely refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. However, as your present mood seems to be one particularly secular, I shall return to the church at once. Indeed, I've just been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I am on my way to join her.
Pray, allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism, a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am celibate, madam!
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion for the last 3 years.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
Dear Canon, I've been waiting for you in the vestry for an hour and 3/4.
Prism, come here, Prism. Prism, where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, after the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. In it contained a work of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, it is with shame that I must admit, I do not know. I only wish I did. On the morning of the day in question, a day that will forever be branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I also had with me a rather old but capacious handbag in which I intended to deposit the manuscript of a work of fiction I had been writing in my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I will never be able to forgive myself, I placed the manuscript in the bassinet and the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Oh, do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist upon knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria. The Brighton Line.
The Brighton Line. Well, I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolyn, you will wait here for me, darling?
If you're not too long, I will wait here for you all my life.
Oh, thank you.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered the thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
This noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if they're having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
Oh, it has stopped now.
Oh! I wish they would come to some conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends upon your answer.
Well, it does appear to be mine. Yes, here is an injury it received in the overturning of an omnibus in younger, happier days. Here's a stain on the lining from the explosion of a temperance beverage. Oh, yes, and here on the lock, my initials. I forgot I had put them there in one of the more and more extravagant moods. The bag is undoubtedly mine. Oh, it is so delightful to have it returned to me. It's been a great inconvenience to be without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is returned to you than this handbag. I was the baby that you placed inside it.
You?
Yes. Mother.
Oh, Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? Well, I do not deny that is a serious blow. But after all, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Oh, Mr. Worthing! There is some error. That lady there can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to sound inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I'm afraid the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Well, then I have a brother after all. I always knew I had a brother. I always said that I had a brother. Cecily, how could you have ever doubted that I have a brother? Algy, get over here. Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolyn, darling, my unfortunate brother. Algy, You young scoundrel! You'll have to treat me with more respect in the future. You have never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
Yes, well, I have been out of practice. But I dare say I have plenty of time now.
Under these unforeseen circumstances, you may kiss your Aunt Augusta.
I am dazed with happiness. Oh, yes. I don't even know who I'm kissing anymore.
I trust that will be the last time I hear you make such an observation.
Probably, yes.
Mr. Worthing, I suppose I should call you Mr. Moncrief now. I feel it is my duty to resign my position and leave this household forever. Any inconvenience I caused you by placing you in this handbag, I sincerely apologize for.
Oh, well, do not mention it, Miss Prism. I am very certain that I had a very pleasant time in your handbag.
Well, it is my duty.
Yes. I find your resignation absurd.
It is my duty all the same. Cecily is soon to be married, and there is nothing that I can teach her. The student has surpassed her tutor, as I am still single. I must go.
A moment, please. I feel this is an opportune moment to point out that the primitive church has been in error on certain points. Corrupt translations may have crept into the text. I beg to solicit for the honor of your hand.
Oh, words fail me at this present moment, but you may read more of my feelings in my 3-volume novel, which I have been writing over the last 18 months.
Oh, my own. My own. But what own are you? What is your name now? What is your Christian name now that you've become someone else?
Good heavens, I had quite forgotten that point. I suppose that your decision upon the subject of my name is irrevocable.
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolyn.
Yes. Well then, the question had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time that Miss Prism placed me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury, including christening, of course, had been lavished upon you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened, that much is certain. I will... Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
Oh, I cannot at the moment recall the general's Christian name. He no doubt had one. He was eccentric, but that was later in life, due to marriage and indigestion and things of that kind.
Yes. Alger, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, he died before I was a year old. We were never even on speaking terms.
Oh. His name would appear in the army lists of the period, I suppose, Lady Bracknell?
But the general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life. But I have no doubt that his name would appear on any military directory.
The army lists of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. Let's see. M. Generals. Malum. Maxbaum, Magley, what ghastly names they all have. Markby, Migsby, Mobbs, Moncrief, Lieutenant, 1840, Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel, General, 1869, Christian names. Ernest John. I always told you, Gwendolyn, that my name was Ernest. Well, it is Ernest after all. I mean, naturally, is Ernest.
Yes, I do recall that the general's name was Ernest. I knew I had some reason for disliking the name.
Ernest, my own Ernest. I felt at the first you could have no other name.
Oh, yes. Well, Gwendolyn, it is very painful for me to find out quite suddenly that for all my life I have been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you ever forgive me?
I can, for I feel you are sure to change.
Oh, my darling.
Letitia!
Oh, Frederick, at last!
Cecily, at last!
Gwendolyn, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
Oh, on the contrary, Aunt Augusta. I've now realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being Ernest.